Hello everyone, and welcome to Secrets Behind the Stars. Settle in, because what we're about to share has the entire industry whispering. Before we dive in, remember to subscribe and spread the word. This is one you'll want your friends to hear in full. Tonight's storm broke under a bright stage light. At a charity event that began as a celebration of hope, Mahassine Merabet stood before the cameras, voice steady at first, then trembling at the edges. For weeks, the rumors had swelled like a tide she refused to answer. But with microphones raised and flashes turned to the highest brightness, she finally let the world into a chapter she had kept guarded, and the room changed. It wasn't just a statement, it was a confession of weight and weariness, and a plea for clarity in a story the tabloids have twisted into spirals. Those standing within a breath of the podium say her eyes shone long before the tears slipped. She paused more than once, as if every word she was about to say had to be asked permission to leave her lips. "I know there has been so much talk," she began, and in that instant the chatter in the corner of the hall went silent. She described how exhausting it had been to watch speculation devour her private life while she tried to hold herself together in front of the cameras, to keep performing, to show up for every scene, every call time, every handshake, without collapsing under questions that stalked her even when the directors yelled cut. She did not lecture. She did not lash out. She spoke as someone haunted by the noise yet determined to stop the echo. And then she addressed the name at the center of the storm. Cenk Torun. While insisting she would not turn her life into a spectacle, she drew a line in the sand that could not be missed. She made it plain that there is a child at the heart of this, a future bigger than the headlines, a tiny life that deserves more than murmurs and maybe laters. She said she could not be expected to carry the entire burden alone, not when responsibility has always had two hands. No one had to interpret the message. It was there, unadorned, in the tremor of her voice. This is not about ego or applause, it's about duty, about stepping up when it counts most. She stressed that being present is not a flavor of the week choice, not something that appears when the lights are kind and the timing is good. It is what you do because you must. The moment those words hung in the air, the internet erupted. Within minutes, her name was trending across platforms. Clips of her speech were looped, slowed down, remixed with caption overlays. The crowd that had waited for weeks to hear her side filled comment sections with notes of solidarity, praise for her courage, for her vulnerability, for moving through a minefield without losing her grace. Meanwhile, the other name in this story, the one she had pointed to without venom but with resolve, Cenk Torun, remained quiet. No posts. No statements. No off-the-record hints. Silence. Insiders whisper that silence had been the strategy for a while, long before this night. They say Mahassine had been trying to live between the set and home, balancing scene work with doctor appointments, script readings with the pulse of what comes next, constantly fielding the question of when, not if, someone would finally speak. Those close to her say she has carried the legal considerations and the emotional toll like a weight that shifts but never leaves, making her careful about every syllable, every gesture, every moment she's photographed entering or leaving a building. She had chosen a long, stubborn quiet, not out of fear, but out of respect, until that quiet started to feel like complicity in her own erasure. The whispers in the corridors of gossip columns have pointed to a breakdown months in the making, a faltering bridge, messages left unopened, conversations postponed into oblivion. Some claim miscommunications stood in for closure, that scheduling conflicts became stand-ins for hard conversations, that being busy became the perfect alibi for not being brave. Whether that's pure rumor or something closer to the bone, we cannot say. What we can say is this: her decision to speak has changed the temperature of the room. You can sense the turning point in the way people now frame the story. It is no longer a private hiccup to be brushed off. It is a moment where lines are drawn and watched. When she stepped away from the podium, she left us with a single, unmistakable tone: this is not a headline to snack on, this is a life unfolding. And as the cameras kept rolling, she wiped her eyes, smiled a brittle smile, and apologized, not for her words, but for the fact that she had to say them at all. She told the room she would not be staying for more questions. Then she walked out, shoulders straight, hands tightly entwined, as if gripping her own resolve. As the hours ticked by, the backstage murmurs only grew louder. Friends described months of pressure, a persistent ache that rarely slept. She had tried to focus on her craft, to throw herself into the rhythm of call sheets and wardrobe fittings, but even the safest spaces began to feel like places where she could be ambushed by speculation. The online tide had become a second audience she had to perform for, one with no rap time and no end credits. People who say they've sat with her in these months say she would reach for lightness and then go quiet mid-sentence, as if the words themselves were too heavy to carry into the open air. Standing outside the venue, after her statement, she found herself at a makeshift press wall again. The questions came soft, cautious, even gentle. An unusual tone for a pack used to chasing headlines like prey. She took a breath and admitted that sometimes the performance of being okay runs out. Sometimes you are strong, polished, camera-ready until you're not. It wasn't an admission of defeat, it was a declaration of being human. No grand theatrics. Just truth. And then there was the line that ricocheted across the night, that she could not be the only one carrying what belongs to two. She did not name dates or offer receipts. She simply insisted on recognition and accountability, the kind that appears in actions, not just in statements crafted at midnight. Commentators, pundits, and anonymous voices tallied in the thousands rallied around that point. It felt like she was voicing what many people have thought but not always said, that in matters of family, responsibility can't be negotiated down. While some voices online tried to cast the moment as mere drama, many more pushed back, framing it as a call to step into the role that life has already chosen for you. The chorus repeating through timelines: support, empathy, patience for answers, and a request for maturity from all involved. And still, from Cenk Torun, not a whisper. People who have worked with Mahassine recently describe a woman changed but unbroken. On set, she is precise. Hitting marks, taking notes, adjusting with the quiet tenacity of someone whose craft matters more than the commotion trying to swallow it. Between takes, though, she withdraws into herself, phone turned face down on the table, eyes somewhere that is not here and not back there either. You see it in the way she exhales before the slate claps. The transition from guarded to glowing is a performance that would make the coldest critic soften. Her family, we are told, has formed a circle around her. A chorus of support. They are said to be the hands at her back, the ones who remind her to eat when the day swallows hours whole, who tell her she can lean without falling, who say the noise will pass and the people worth keeping will still be there when it does. Those closest to her say this time has sharpened her, made her more tender and more resolute at once, a paradox only those in the thick of it truly understand. The question that everyone is asking tonight is simple. How long will the silence from the other side last? Some claim a statement is being drafted, polished, circled in red, waiting for that mythical right moment. Others suggest silence is the strategy itself, designed to outweight the fervor until the public begins to move on. But this time, the audience is not drifting. This time, there is a child at the story's center, and the public remembers. Every hour without an answer becomes part of the narrative, whether intended or not. What Mahassine made clear is that this is not a petty feud or a plot twist to keep the ratings high. She framed it as a matter of principle. She pleaded with the world to stop treating her life like an episode that resets next week. This isn't gossip, her tone implied with every word, this is a life with a future attached. If there was anger, it was the kind that simmers toward change rather than burns everything down. If there was pain, it was braided with resolve. Behind the curtain, sources say she wrestled with the knowledge for a long time before letting it touch the air. The day she found out, the joy came tangled with 1,000 questions. How would this blend with scripts that demand other versions of herself? How would it move through a calendar already overflowing? And crucially, would she have a teammate, or would she be asked to play every position at once? They say she tried, again and again, to handle it quietly, to settle details in rooms without cameras. They say she sent messages worded with care, had conversations that promised more conversations later, only to watch the later drift into the haze of unfinished business. Those whispers might be just that, whispers. But tonight, her public courage gave shape to what had been missed. She pulled the thread taut and told the world what she has told those around her from the beginning. She will not run, and she will not let anyone else run either. She will stand where she is and demand the simplest of things: presence, acknowledgement, the taking up of a role that exists whether or not it is announced in a press release. Industry colleagues back her quietly and, in some cases, not so quietly. They say that even in the heaviest weeks, she shows up with the same professional fire she's always had, just wrapped in a quieter frame. She has become wary of greenroom chatter, more likely to sit with a tea in a corner than to cross the floor and swap stories. But when the clapboard hits and the lens finds her, the transformation is total. If anything, the craft has become a shelter, a place where she is not asked to explain herself beyond the scene's truth. And so the story balances on a breath. On one side, everything she has laid bare, her vulnerability, her request, her refusal to let her future be decided in whispers. On the other, the absence of an answer. People keep refreshing their feeds, waiting for a few lines that might rewrite the atmosphere of the conversation. Apologies, clarity, a promise of partnership, who knows? The point is, the room is listening, and the time to speak does not stretch forever. Tonight, when the lights dimmed and the event moved on, the headlines did not. They multiplied. Analysts began debating whether what we witnessed was the beginning of a new chapter or the closing of a door that had been left ajar for too long. In comment sections, strangers wrote to her as if she were a friend, telling her she is not alone, that responsibility is not something you beg for and then accept in installments. You saw her message reframed not as a lover's spat, but as a plea for a child's future. And perhaps that is the most important frame to keep. This story has lived too long in shadows, tugged on by impatient hands. Tonight, it stepped into the light and demanded to be seen for what it is: a call for accountability, a refusal to be silenced, and a hope, daring, perhaps naive, but a hope nonetheless, that the person addressed will step forward with grace. The one person who has not spoken yet holds a key that could calm the waters, even just enough for the work ahead to begin. Will he use it? Will there be an acknowledgement, a plan, the vocabulary of commitment that travels beyond words into actions? For now, all we know is what she chose to share, that she is tired of performing strength without support, that she has tried to fix things away from the spotlight and now must tether her truth to the public record, that she believes responsibility comes not as a favor granted but as a role accepted. She leaves the stage tear-bright but unbowed, a woman who has decided this story will not be written without her pen. We will be watching, as will everyone who cares about what comes next for Mahassine Merabet and for the child at the center of these quiet wars. The hope, repeated like a prayer in every timeline tonight, is that Cenk Torun steps into the conversation not as an opponent, but as a partner in the making of a future bigger than both of them. And if that hope is met with silence, then tonight will stand as the point where one voice chose to speak for two until two could speak for one. This is Secrets Behind the Stars, and we will keep following this story with care, compassion, and the honesty it demands. If you've made it this far, make sure you're subscribed and share this video so the conversation stays focused on empathy, accountability, and the real lives at stake. Until the next update, take care of yourselves and each other.